people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Yesterday, unified super bantamweight champion from Philadelphia, Stefan Fulton, took to social media, added Eddie Hearn, and stated, "We need those other two belts," to which Eddie Hearn replied, #Earn with Hearn.
He's talking about Mutajan Akhmadaliev's two belts.
I've chosen to give Stefan Fulton the benefit of the doubt, at least for the time being, not rush to judgment or jump to conclusions. Let the story tell itself, although 9 times out of 10, whenever a PBC fighter is involved, a fight doesn't happen, especially when the fight involves some other fighter that's on some other side of the street. Stefan Fulton himself, he's been adamant that he means to become this division's undisputed champion. But what is his team? What are the people over there at the PBC? What is Showtime? What are they doing about it? Are they prepared to make MJ Akhmadaliev an offer, or are they leaving the onus to do the fight on Eddie Hearn? Because if the onus to do the fight's on Eddie Hearn, well, that would require Stefan to come over to Eddie Hearn's side of things. This only works out two ways.
It's either your people are going to pay to do the fight, or Eddie Hearn is going to pay to do the fight.
If it is a fight you're looking for, it's either you're going to go to MJ, or you're going to do what you've got to do to bring MJ to you.
Well, Showtime used some of that money they were willing to pay Jaime Munguia to come over to pay MJ Akhmadaliev to come over.
Shouldn't be that expensive. These are super bantamweights we're talking about. These are 122-pound fighters. Super bantamweight, lively division that it's been the last couple of years. It's not one of the glamour weights, and the purses are far from exorbitant. Me as a boxing fan, I don't really care where the fight lands, whether it lands on Showtime as a PBC show or Matchroom as a DAZN show. It doesn't make the least bit of difference to me so long as the fight happens and this entire fiasco doesn't devolves into a
witch hunt.
Turns into another rousing blame game scenario. Whose fault is it this fight isn't happening? Is it MJ's?
Is it Stefan's?
We as consumers of the sport are supposed to hang on the edge of our seats as week after week and month after month, a fight doesn't happen. We've been here before. We've been there and done that in reference to more highly anticipated fights than this one. The bottom line is
either Stefan Fulton accepts an offer from Matchroom to cross over,
or Stefan Fulton's people formulate the offer and get MJ to cross over. And there is little to nothing in between. It's either you pay to do the fight on your side of things, or you let Eddie Hearn pay to do the fight on his side of things.
Simple as.
Really is as simple as that. And given how adamant Stefan Fulton has been the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, I mean, believe you me, this isn't the first mention he's made of getting MJ Akhmadaliev in the ring. Though throughout, I've questioned what's actually being done on his end of the spectrum, his side of the aisle, in order to make that fight happen. What are you actually doing?
What's your team actually doing? What's Showtime actually doing?
I don't expect the powers that be to send out an unbeaten unified champion to some other side of the street so easily. I don't. This isn't like sending Marcus Brown over to the top-ranked ESPN side of things, or Andy Ruiz.
Sending Andy over to Matchroom for AJ, or sending Marcus over to ESPN for Artur.
Sending either John Molina or Felix Diaz to top-ranked for Terrence Crawford. I get it. That those fighters, they weren't champions. Stefan Fulton is. So you won't part with him as easily as you were willing to part with them in those situations. I get it. But if you don't want to have to send the guy over, that means you have to bring MJ to you.
If you really want to do this fight, it does.
Otherwise, it's just promotion by way of name association. Name dropping a fighter for a fight you're not really looking for, and all you really want to do is garner attention.
Promotion by way of name association. We see it all the time.
We'll see if this does or doesn't result in a fight, because at 122 pounds, this really is the only fight to make. And just in keeping with the theme of promotion by way of name association, here comes Old Fish Eyes Frank Warren associating the name of his fighter, Daniel Dubois, with the name of Eddie Hearn's fighter, Anthony Joshua, saying Anthony Joshua is made for Daniel Dubois. Now, I fancy him against anybody, Warren said of Dubois in an interview with IFL TV. He's a big, big puncher. He's got a great jab. I've said it before. I honestly think him and Joshua, Joshua, is made for him. My personal comment on that is I think he's made for him. But Joshua's got to get through Usyk first. Warren made it clear he is pushing for Joshua, who is promoted by Warren.
Well, of course he's pushing for Joshua. There's more money in a Joshua fight for Daniel than if Usyk wins.
Warren made it clear he is pushing for Joshua, who is promoted by Warren's bête noire, Eddie Hearn, to defeat Usyk. I want the Brit to win, Warren said. Of course I do. This is where it's all happening, here in the heavyweight division. It's great if it comes through. AJ, we will be delighted for him.
You've got a fighter that generates as much interest as an Anthony Joshua. Everybody indirectly benefits for it.
Indirectly, they do, as he draws eyes and draws interest, not just into boxing, but the heavyweight division in particular. The other fighters at or around that weight indirectly benefit from that attention.
Fighters like Daniel Dubois.
He'll fight in late September or early October, Warren said. We will find a decent opponent for him to fight. Warren thinks longtime British contender Dillian Whyte would be an interesting opponent for Daniel Dubois at some point down the line. Warren famously butted heads with Whyte earlier this year in April in the promotion for Whyte's challenge of WBC title holder Tyson Fury. Warren's charge: Whyte, among other things, refused to show up at the press conference to announce the fight and declined to partake in the pre-fight publicity. Fury defeated Whyte by 6th-round stoppage. Dillian, contrary to what he thought was going to happen working with us, I know he had a decent experience, Warren said. Why not? It's a great fight.
I said it before and I'll say it again. If Dillian Whyte were going to change his decorum, I don't think he'd cross over to Queensbury.
If Dillian Whyte, who up until this point in many ways has been a matchroom fighter, albeit a matchroom fighter on a fight-by-fight basis, matchroom promoting his shows and promoting his fights, if he were in the market for a new promotional outfit, if he were going to change his decorum, I'd sooner expect him to cross over to Boxer and Sky than Queensbury and BT. It's not a coincidence that Savannah Marshall, April Hunter ended up over there. It's not a coincidence that
They were both matchroom fighters not that long ago.
several familiar faces that you grew accustomed to seeing as part of matchroom shows, Savannah Marshall, April Hunter, Huey Fury, Chris Eubank Jr., they're all over there at Sky and Boxer now. It's not a coincidence that Chris Billum Smith,
You used to see him fight as part of matchroom shows. Now his next fight with Isaac Chamberlain, that's on Sky and Boxer.
you are seeing a proliferation of familiar faces over there at Sky and Boxer that used to box on matchroom shows as part of matchroom cards. Fighters like Natasha Jonas, so on and so forth. And I'd wager that if Dillian Whyte were going to change his decorum and cease doing business with Matchroom to do business with someone else, it would be Sky and Boxer before it's Queensbury and BT.
Sky can offer him more money than the people at BT can.
Sky is the bigger platform, so I think it goes without saying that Frank better not hold his breath for Dillian Whyte to give Daniel Dubois the time of day. He's going to have to find that kid somebody else to fight. He's talking about Anthony Joshua.
You know, in a scenario where Anthony Joshua wins and gets his belts back,
Frank would only have one option in a scenario like that. Even if Daniel Dubois, by some chance, were to become Anthony's mandatory challenger, you're going to have to send him across the street, bud. You're going to have to send him to Matchroom and DAZN if what you really want is a fight with Anthony Joshua.
what do you think? That he's going to win his belts back and then Eddie's going to ship him out to you, ship him out to be content on your platform?
Fat fucking chance. And Frank Warren, he's been in this business long enough. He knows that. There's no real expectation of bringing Anthony Joshua over to BT. So if you start talking about a Joshua versus Dubois fight in that scenario, you must be talking about sending Daniel over to DAZN, because it doesn't happen any other way.
That's if Joshua wins. What if he loses?
If he loses, the way a lot of people are expecting him to lose, Anthony Joshua signed a lifetime promotional deal to Matchroom ahead of the first Alexander Usyk fight. He very recently made an announcement that he's going all in with DAZN as the platform for his fights. So the issues that a Daniel Dubois fight would have,
Whether he beats Usyk or Usyk beats him, those issues would still be there.
don't misunderstand me. Anthony Joshua losing this rematch to Alexander Usyk, it would affect his marquee value moving forward, though not so much that he'd be reduced to being on the same level as Daniel Dubois. He'd still be a bigger, much bigger name than Daniel Dubois. He'd still be the A-side fighter in that situation, even coming off a loss. I mean, what are we talking about? Daniel Dubois just knocked out Trevor Bryan, and that flew largely under the radar. That's the most news Frank's guy's been making.
Your guy just fought in a shoebox because you lost the purse bid to Don King.
Could you imagine what people would say if Eddie Hearn lost a purse bid to Don King, today's Don King, so that one of his matchroom elite fighters ends up fighting in a...
Was that a high school auditorium?
He wants Daniel Dubois to fight on a big stage, thinks he's big time, thinks Anthony Joshua is tailor-made for him, when some might argue that it's the other way around. That Daniel Dubois is tailor-made for Anthony Joshua, the way he doesn't keep his head off center, eats all those lead hands, all those jabs, the way he did in the Joe Joyce fight, which he lost. He has since hired Shane McGuigan to train him. Shane's in his corner, but I haven't seen any really glaring improvements in Daniel. He looked less than spectacular, looked downright weird. More recently against Trevor Bryan here in the US of A, he secured the knockout the way I expected him to, the way I predicted, but it wasn't a performance to write home about.
Frank Warren doesn't expect to get Daniel an Anthony Joshua fight.
Win, lose, or draw, Frank's not serious. What this is promotion by way of name association. At a time when the most news, his prized stallion in the heavyweight division, at a time when the most news that Tyson Fury is making is that he's staying retired and he's not allowed into the United States.
That he tried to board a plane to America for the second time and he was rejected for the second time.
When he has to try and compete with major fights, major cards like the Joshua versus Usyk sequel, that rematch, this is what passes for promotion for Frank Warren's fighters. Look at what he's got Joe Joyce doing. He's got him fighting Christian Hammer.
Joseph Parker gave him the runaround, decided to cross over to Sky and Boxer.
Don't be surprised if you start hearing rumors and rumblings about a Dubois versus Joyce rematch. Frank ain't got a lot of options for those boys. Can't you see that?
Well, you want to put Daniel Dubois in there with Anthony Joshua. You going to send him to the zone? Because that's the only way it happens.
It's promotion by way of name association, if it's anything. He's talking about a scenario where Anthony gets his belts back. Well, one would think in a scenario like that, the guy Anthony ends up fighting, if it is one of Frank's boys, it'd be Tyson before it's Daniel.
One would think.
Frank is just riding that fight's wave. Finally, just in keeping with the theme of Frank Warren's fighters, Frank Warren's boys, and what's in store for them, Joe Joyce very recently issued out a public message for Joseph Parker. He states, "So, Mr. Parker, I always wanted to fight you, and you pretended that you wanted to fight, but in reality, you say and do everything to avoid me. After it was all agreed, you pulled out of the scheduled date, July 2nd, with a BS excuse about your trainer. And then you begged to have the fight pushed to September to have more time to train. I agree. Then you asked for more stuff. That was all agreed. After saying it was all good for weeks, and then you signed somewhere else. Real talk, you're full of shit, and you don't want to fight. Tell your new promoter I'm fighting on September 24th. If you're not scared, sign the contract."
You know, I think Joe Joyce was going to stop Joseph Parker.
And I think Joseph Parker thinks Joe Joyce was going to stop Joseph Parker.
Must be why he signed a boxer.
Gotta be. He was already in the thick of negotiations with Joe Joyce to fight that guy, and all the issues that the negotiation was facing, all the delays, they were on the Joseph Parker side of things. You don't jump into bed with Boxer and Sky while you're in the thick of negotiations with Joe Joyce because you're focused on fighting Joe Joyce. No, you jumped into bed with them to get away from that fight.
It is kind of obvious.
Joseph Parker, yet another fighter that you grew accustomed to seeing fighting on Matchroom shows. He's now a Sky Sports boxer.
As Sky attempts to recapture some semblance of what they built with Matchroom over the years.
I reiterate, you couldn't have jumped into bed with Sky and Boxer because it's a Joe Joyce fight you were after. You couldn't have jumped into bed with them in the thick of those negotiations because it was this guy you were looking to fight. This guy fights on BT under the Queensberry Promotions banner, and you know that.
Joe Joyce says he's returning to action in September. Against who? I don't know.
He's in a pole position to become the WBO's mandatory challenger, though the value of that is contingent upon who wins Joshua versus Usyk too. If it's Anthony Joshua, maybe they push for that fight. But if it's Usyk...
The fight is worth less money. It's worth a lot less money than it would be if it were Joshua, Joe, we're fighting.
I don't even know what Alexander Usyk's promotional situation would be in that scenario. A scenario where he beats Anthony Joshua for a second time. Does he stay in bed with Matchroom or does he shop himself around? See what those belts are worth to other promotional outfits. His country, being a war-torn country at this time, does he head back over there? Does he retire? There are many questions as to what happens beyond this upcoming rematch. What happens beyond this upcoming fight. Though at minimum what you know is that if Usyk keeps those alphabet titles, there's a lot less money.
You don't get fighting Usyk what you get fighting Anthony Joshua. That goes without saying.
Use your imagination, your own imagination, as to what effect that might have on Joe Joyce's future fights and his future schedule. He says he's coming back in September. Against who? I don't know.
Ben Shalom says he made an offer to have Joe come over and do that fight on their side.
An exercise in futility. No one, myself included, is expecting Joe Joyce to cross over from Queensbury over to Sky for that fight. You're making that offer with no expectation of the fight actually getting over the line. And what you're really doing is saving face for Joe. You're saving face for Joseph Parker.
Looks bad. You were in the middle of negotiations with that guy. You dragged your feet. You fucked up the fight.
And then you popped up at Boxer. You ducked that guy. That's how it looks. And that's what people are saying. That's what Joe Joyce is saying. And I don't blame him.
Middle of negotiations with Joe Joyce, you went to a rival platform and signed to them to fight under the rival banner.
What you effectively did is put distance between yourself and that fight and drove a wedge through it. People at Sky Sports are going to conjure up some guys for Joseph Parker to fight now, leaving Joe Joyce high and dry, at least at the moment. Though Joe Joyce, unlike Joseph Parker, he's in a pole position to fight for an alphabet title, and we'll just have to see what happens with that. One fight that they can make for Joseph Parker over there on Sky is a potential Michael Hunter fight. Michael Hunter, who was supposed to be fighting Hughie Fury, but Hughie Fury once again fell ill.
Again.
Not the first time that's happened. And now Joe...
Let's get some Michael Hunter versus Joseph Parker action.
It's an interesting fight. Sky needs those. What about Joseph Parker versus Martin Bakole? Martin Bacole's coming off a career-best win over Olympic gold medalist Tony Yoka, a then unbeaten fighter. You see what he did to that guy. Why don't Sky sign Martin Bakole?
Let Martin fuck up Joseph Parker's face.
I like the idea of that fight. That's an intriguing fight. Martin Bakole versus former WBO heavyweight champion Joseph Parker.
Yeah, I might like that fight. You might too, but does David Higgins like that fight? Does Joseph Parker?
It's the reality. Joseph Parker avoided Philippe Hrgovic when he was on the Matchroom side of things. He seems to have also ducked Joe Joyce. Joseph Parker didn't go over to Sky and Boxer because he wants to earn his money.
The stars aligned to where he had the perfect alternative to being in risky fights.
Everybody knows that Boxer and Sky, they're attempting to carve out their own lane in the sport of boxing on the heels of Matchroom parting ways with them, and they're paying out a lot of cash to a lot of guys. They want familiar faces, Joseph Parker being one among them. He capitalized off a happenstance, a sheer happenstance.
I don't think he wants to fight anybody good.